When's your mum? When's your mum? I found that out after 2.5 weeks already. Yeah, absolutely.
Constitution.
Is that it? Is that it?
That's it. I never knew. It's about read every single word. She's one of your.
But I don't know.
Yeah, she's fair. I'm Huddersfield. I'll live kind of between Huddersfield and Wigan.
No, yeah, I won't worry too much. We'll stop you doing this.
Into the museum.
Yeah,
When I was working at Wakefield,
yeah, well, all right, okay.
King's Street.
You'll have to.
Just round the corner from
It's a very small world, isn't it?
Did you work at King's Street at one point?
No, that's a legitimate decision on licenses. It's not counted as politics. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. You can't harass our young lady today, you know that.
You can't harass
I say you can't harass her, you're not at home, you know. I've been watching you, and the second time you've been in the bed.
Big thumbprint.
The next time you got to sit over here.
Just in that zone.
I don't know, you missed that. Are we hungry?
Oh, sorry.
I thought, when you know how many last week?
Week before.
Week before.
Distant memory.
Mm.
What was the day? It was a day.
Yeah, last weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Can you remember your name?
No, not really.
So your t-shirt are here? Oh, yeah. And the staff, is it?
Yeah, but it's got
Captain Page.
county, and if I knew you were going to go to vote, I would have said no.
No.
I would have said on the input and said no.
Sorry. Thank you.
It's not into the event.
I said to staff today,
Anyway, it's not taking that part, that's for sure.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members. Welcome to the Policy and Resources Committee meeting. We'll make a start. First of all, any apologies? Full house, thank you very much. We've got quite a lot of members of the public here, so we'll do some quick introductions if that's okay with everyone. I'll start with myself. My name is Councillor Nadeem Ahmed, Leader of the Council and Chair for this meeting. Am I right?
Howard Culshaw, Head of Legal Services and Monitoring Officer.
Jane Watson, Head of Democratic Services.
I'm Neil Watson, I'm a Service Manager with responsibilities for planning and taxes.
Councillor David Coburn-Price.
Sarah Coburn-Price, I'm the councillor for Bullsworth and Fulbridge.
Councillor Mike Goldthorpe, AB and Coates Ward Councillor.
Councillor Mohammed Aslam, Bradley Ward Councillor.
David Whip, I'm EB and Coates Ward Councillor, and I lead the Liberal Democrat group.
Councillor Asjan Mahmood, Leader of the Labour Group.
Also for the other would also for Bradley Circle.
Mohammed Hanif, Councillor for Relay.
Hi, good evening. I'm Philip Spur, Director of Place. I'm new to the council. This is my first P&R meeting this evening.
Rose Rouse, Chief Executive. I'm delighted to have Philip join us.
Thank you very much. And can I make a request? Can people, if they haven't already put the phones on silent, please do so. And once the people who've put their names down speak, have spoken, they can't come back in. You can't come back into the debate unless you've been asked directly. Okay. So item 1, declarations of interest. Remember, Councillor Wick.
Chairman, I haven't got a declaration of interest, but I did ask you to take an urgent item because of the exodus of engineers from our engineering services section. I haven't picked up any response to that, and can I ask, are you going to take that as an urgent item this evening?
My view on this is, I believe, yes, we need to have a discussion on it, and it is urgent, as you've said in your email. My view is that I don't think this is the forum to discuss that here this evening, but what I would suggest is that we set up an urgent meeting with group leaders in the next week, if possible. We can try and get that set up for next week forward and find a solution.
Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's very important that we do discuss this as a matter of urgency, and this committee would have some authority in being able to address the issue. We've got engineers leaving to go to higher salaried positions elsewhere. As I understand it, there was an opportunity, and perhaps there is still an opportunity to retain those staff. On a strategic level, we will be unable to carry out the projects and the programmes that we've got within our capital programme without a fully staffed resource. And I think it's imperative that we do discuss it tonight.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Councillor, with that in terms of the urgency, but what I'm saying is I don't believe this is the right forum to have this discussion. We've had members of staff leave important posts in this council previously, and this isn't the forum where it has been discussed in the past. We've never had that discussion. But like I said, yeah, we need to set up an urgent meeting. Let's do that immediately. And we'll have that discussion. And I want to have an open discussion with yourselves and as Chad. Let's try and find a solution to this.
Can I just come in there? As a councillor for that ward as well and for this, can you notify the local councillors as well, and can we make it as an urgent?
I think initially it's for group leaders, and then
We should all be involved really, and have our say.
This is a staffing issue. We've never involved all councillors in staffing issues. That's not how we do things.
Well, it needs to go on ASP. If we can't do it tonight, we need some urgency on this. We can't afford to lose these engineers.
And to be honest, in the past, as group leaders, we don't really have special meetings to discuss people leaving, but on this occasion, I think it's important that we do have that discussion. Thank you. Okay, item 2 is public question time. This is to receive a maximum of 15 minutes question from members on items which are not on the agenda. Any questions? Councillor Akram? Councillor Akram. Mr. Akram.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, can we have the taxi item?
Yes, I'll go on. Yeah. Okay. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting.
Just got one typo. On page 4, in the resolved number 4, it says the proposed increase in band D of 289, but that word's increase in should be removed.
Yeah.
And the increase is in the next part of the sentence.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Other than that, I'll move them.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favour, Michelle? Thank you. Okay. So what we'll do is, if that's okay with members, is I want to move an item forward, which is the item 11, taxi safety and measures to improve public safety. There's 4 speakers on this item. Just check that you're all here. I think you are. Mr. Akram, Mr. Saeed.
I will draw my name because Mr. Akram is going to represent.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Ilyas? Sorry? Do you want to speak, Mr. Ilyas?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Zahir Ahmed?
So he come here today, he's got an emergency with his family, so he's actually at hospital.
Okay. That's fine. So we've got 2 speakers. So, Mr. Akram, I'll bring you in first. You've got 5 minutes.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The taxi item which is there, which is gone through the taxi licensing committee, it says in the report and the remarks of the Mr. Chairman that majority of the taxi trade represents in favour of this. We don't. I don't know where he got this information. This is absolutely untrue. We have not been consulted. We never had a face-to-face meeting with this chairman on this, and I don't think the recommendation which is approved by the taxi licensing is not going to work. This is not going to work. It's very costly, that up system, which is going to cost £30,000 for 12 months. So for 1 year, £30,000 burden on the taxis. We can't afford that. It's not going to work. We've had similar things before. I believe in safety. We're doing our best to bring in the maximum safety on taxis. And the biggest concern is the roads and the taxis itself is the testing of the taxis. The compliance test which the taxis get tested on, I don't think that is the equivalent standard to the VOSA testing, the Ministry of Transport testing. That should be in place. That's where the problem is. The serious problem. Of course, cause of this is that. And we need, in my opinion, a set of a working group which is very important. We should be involved in this on the consultation, and we will come with the positive feedback and the result which will work for everybody, and it will work on. fair and square. It's very important because we had this before. Many times, the many councillors come and gone, especially the David Clegg has been a chairman of taxi licensing for a long, long time. And we had this consultation meetings on those times, and they do work. Pauline McCormick, she was a great councillor of that time. We had these problems, we worked. We got together, we worked, and there's been a successful result for the all parties together. So I will request this to be thrown out absolutely and set up a working group. And we will come with the positive feedback which will be economical and workable across the board. Definitely it will work. You know, there's a lot of problems in the trade and the areas, and we've just been pushed into this, dragged into this. It's very unfair. Very, very unfair, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Mr. Ilyas.
Mr. Chairman, I was saying these things what Mr. Akram saying, but a lot of them things what he went to us is very bad and all, you see, because a lot of them people have only one car. What they're doing is very wrong, you see. It's not going to work, you see, because they're going to take new cars these days, go on these roads, look at these roads, what's going on these roads. If you take one, run at 6 months, something, when you take them in garage, you'll see what's happening with these cars. And I'm thinking, these people are sitting over here, members, you think about your own cars, you driving your own cars, and you see these roads, what's happening in these roads, and you keep saying, I know safety for people and safety for these drivers and all, you know, it's not workable. And it's a lot of the people, they have only one cars, yeah? So what they going to do about it? If they have one car, they're going to go every week and it's costing them too much. And what you're saying is something wrong, you have to repair it. We doing this. And I don't know what you're thinking, what's the, every time you say something up, something coming up, and it's not workable. And I'm saying to you, these members sitting over here, you think about it, what's going on. I'm retiring at a bit, but I'm saying to you, these large working, you're going to take them out of it, or what are you going to do with them? And think about it, what you're going to do with it.
Dole office, they're all going to Dole office.
Well, they have to go Dole office, any of these, whatever you're going to say, think about it, what you're going to say about this meeting. And please, I'm asking you again, you think about it and say what these lot going through with it. Not me, I'm going to be retiring in a bit anyhow. But I'm saying to you, think about it, because I've been coming over here for a long time now, and they keep pressing these taxi drivers. What's the taxi driver? If it's something wrong with them, take them, give them something thinking about it, 2 weeks, 3 weeks or something like that, but not going to take these cars off the road or something like that. And think about it, what you're going to say. Everybody I'm saying over here, members sitting over here, you have a car and all, yeah? So think about it, what's road condition these days. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Kieran, who's the chair of the taxi licensing committee, has got his hand up. So, Kieran.
Thank you, Chair. So, to introduce the report to members, problem with safety concerns and spot checks results goes back a long time. There was a member of the current committee that has been attending that meeting for nigh on 16 years, who regularly informs us that this is a long record of poor results. Nothing new. Situation has recently been declining for the last 5-6 years at some pace, with the latest results being the worst on record. The committee has noted the impact of COVID in recent times on the finances within the trade. However, safety has to be a priority even with those financial burdens. The committee has tried extremely hard this last 18 months to introduce voluntary policies and to steer the trade towards best practice in order to turn the results around. Multiple working groups, meetings with the trade outside of committees, meetings with test garages have all been undertaken in order to understand the problem and the potential solutions, bringing the results of all this effort back to committee and putting in place action plans with the trade that have yielded no improvements, as the actions were not carried out. It's quite simpler. We're now at a situation where it's hard for it to get even worse when 15 out of 16 taxis at the latest spot check failed, thus being there's little scope for a further decline. A death or serious injury is now a certainty with those statistics. At recent spot checks, I saw cars rolling away on the test site with the handbrake applied, engine bays and exhaust systems covered in engine oil, screeching brakes metal on metal because they've worn down so much, and more. That was just the tip of the iceberg. This at last committee last week was met with laughter from the trade at last week's committee meeting from a small minority of the operators and drivers that attended. So when I was citing what I had witnessed, there was laughter from the back of the room, but you hear today that they're well engaged and wishing to work with the committee. Unfortunately, the council is not granted powers or resources for the enforcement of legislation in place, such as HAZOA, which is the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, and other relevant vehicular laws. These sit with other agencies such as VOSA and other authorities such as the police. We must therefore protect the public ourselves as an authority, and indeed the trade themselves, by introducing policies which compel the trade into acting as they have not been willing to do so themselves. This is because the trade has proven for many years that cannot manage it themselves. As well as displaying an inability to meet the promises of agreed actions, such as the daily check sheets that could have been done on paper, over the last few meetings that we've had in working groups, comments have been received from the committee such as, "It's not my responsibility to manage safety, take it up with drivers," which is contrary to HAZOA and other legislation. It is indeed their responsibility to manage safety. "We cannot do what you're asking regarding the spot checks and the daily checks," which is again contrary to legislation. "It's impossible for us to enforce daily checks," which I do understand if the operator has a lot of vehicles, that would be quite impossible to do on paper, which is where the application, which we'll discuss, solves a lot of the problems for them. However, as difficult as it is, legislation states that you must employ relevant resources to be able to comply with the law, so that statement doesn't take any effect at all in law. We've heard again today that the sole focus and reason for the issues that the taxi operators are experiencing and the quality of the vehicles are that potholes are the root cause. However, look at any of the last spot check results and you'll see that potholes and such damage has not been the cause whatsoever. It's probably around 5% of the issues. Potholes are not the cause, and that is a total red herring to apportion the blame to that. And just to reiterate, last week's committee saw laughter and mocking of spot check results from a small minority of members that attended. Many more comments have been made along a similar vein, all coming without any recommendation to the committee to improve the safety record. This has shown the committee that the trade has no desire nor any intention to implement new practices to remedy the situation. This policy is purely about public safety, ultimately saving lives and reducing the chance of serious injury, because the results that we are seeing recently are quite catastrophic. There's no political agenda coming out of this policy. It focuses purely on introducing policies which will do what the trade admit they cannot do themselves, such as enforce the daily checks. This is designed to improve the safety of all taxis across the borough, whether the business model is operator-owned or driver-owned vehicle. We're putting the focus on the driver themselves to undertake the daily checks, which relieves some of the pressure from the operators. Focuses on the front line where the biggest improvements can be seen the fastest, as in the application will put the focus on the driver. It is the most expeditious way to expedite the improvements that we need to see. It's also the most cost effective. So that is my introduction to the report. I'm happy to take questions alongside Neil Watson, who's the officer in charge of this department. And I would ask, because it is a safety consideration, and I have a genuine fear for public safety, that a name vote is taken on this agenda item. Thank you.
Sarah?
Could I ask Mr. Well, I've got two questions for Mr. Watson. The The first is 180 online responses. When we compare any of Pendle's online consultations, is that a lot, average, small amount?
Chairman, I don't have that data to compare, of course. If you compare it to the local plants, probably low.
Right.
But it depends on the subject.
Okay, okay. Well, I'd be very interested then in that case to hear your thoughts on what's been said and the paper.
Through you, Chairman. I became, if you will, in charge of this section of service in 2016, and we went through a series of meetings at that point. I think Councillor Cooney was leader of the council. We had meetings with the trade, and this was an issue. And I looked back earlier, and the first spot check was an 81% failure rate, and that was brought up, and we tried to go through that. And there's been various iterations with the trade and consultations and working groups. There was a dip in the failure rates and improvements, but that was after 2 cases where operators had licences revoked, and we were at Burnley Magistrates Court, not Crown Court. So that kind of sanction, the ultimate sanction, resulted in a betterment for a short while. Chairman, we don't really know what else to do with this. You know, there have been discussions and there have been changes to policy, and the results of spot checks aren't improving. The last one was almost 100% failure rate. One taxi passed that. In essence, this policy and the changes are intended just for the driver to use, it's an app, to check that there are wheel bolts on there, that there are brakes, that the seat belts work, that the car doors open, that there aren't bald tyres. So we're in a modern world, modern technology can help us with that, and it will aid drivers in themselves driving. So it's not just about the public, it's about the driver driving safely. Simple checks like, you know, have you got wheel bolts in? Something that somebody can do in a few minutes every day, and that will the purpose of this is solely, as the chairman of the taxi licensing committee said, the purpose of this is solely to improve what on any standard anywhere that I'd be aware of. You know, when you're talking about failure rates never below 70%, it's quite significant. Chairman, the view that I would take is we've tried over 6 or 7 years to get voluntary improvements, and it just is getting worse. I think this is a proportionate approach using modern technology to give the trade the tools it needs to make those safety improvements.
If I could ask you another question, how would you say Pendle would compare? I mean, it seems shocking to me, but how would Pendle compare with, say, other regions, other councils, other areas, perhaps locally?
There's no comparative data, so this is anecdotal, but you go to Lytham. I was in Lytham a while ago. The taxis were very new, but the prices were higher as well. So there's an issue definitely about prices here and profits with that. But I can't give you a comparative with the rest of the country, I'm afraid, where we are with that.
Councillor Iqbal.
Thanks, Chairman, for allowing me to speak. I just want to start off by just picking on some of the points that Councillor McGladdy has said. And I raised this with him at the meeting last week, that the 93% failure rate on the 28th of October is right as the worst. It's not worst, it's the worst on record in Pendle. The council has a duty, and if I just share with you, Chairman, in terms of the failures, I've got the list from Jackie Canby, and if you look at some of the failures, so for example, there's at least 5 cars that failed on excessive oil leaks, and the interesting thing is that those cars passed their taxi test within the last 3 months of that spot check. So an excessive oil leak, I'm non-mechanic, doesn't appear overnight, it appears on a drip basis. So the issue is that what has the council done in terms of testing those vehicles? Number one, there's one car, for example, whose windscreen wipers were worn and affected driver's view. It also had an excessive oil leak. that had been tested only 6 weeks before the spot check. Again, windscreen wipers don't suddenly in the middle of summer disappear. Something has happened there. Likewise, Chairman, there's a car that was tested by this council on the 19th of October, only 7 days before the test, and the parts that it failed on were severely deteriorated. The anti-roll bar top boil joint was severely deteriorated. That can't have happened in 7 days, surely. So again, the issue is, in terms of the council, what have we done to address some of the testing regimes that we've got in place at our garages, not the fault of the trade. And if, for example, you look at, the report says, wheel studs missing from all 4 tyres. Now, again, I'm no mechanic, I drive my own car, but if all my wheel studs were missing on my car, surely the wheels would have fallen off as soon as I got on the road, wouldn't they? But again, the council, I think, has a duty of care to the trade. But in terms of Councillor McGladry, in my view, distorting the facts, if you look at the figures for the last 7 years, and I've got all the spot checks here, 50% of the failure rate, 50% of those tests that were carried out in the last 7 years had a failure rate of less than 50%. Now, some would say 50% is too much, but as Councillor Neil Butterworth at the taxi licensing meeting last week said, you'll never get a 0%. And in fact, the chairman said that if we ever got below 50%, he'd buy everybody pakoras from Manchester, or a pint in that case. Well, under the chairmanship of various chairmen, what I'm going to highlight in 2016-17, Neil says that some taxi operators' licences were revoked. Again, I've got that information. They were revoked in 2015 when the failure rate was 76, 73 and 71%. In 2017, it went down to 54, 42, 46, 56 and 47, and then went slightly back up to 55. Now, the reason for that, Chairman, was that under the chairmanship of Councillor David Clegg at the time, the taxi committee used to have 2 meetings with the trade every year. Under the chairmanship of Councillor McGladry, and again, he was challenged at this at the meeting last week, how many meetings he's had with the trade reps, and some of the trade reps are here. It was a big fat 0. He may have had outside meetings with people, but having a meeting in somebody's house doesn't count as an official meeting. Councillor Clegg and the taxi licensing committee, of which I was a member, used to have meetings in this room with the trade and agree on some things and agree to disagree on some things, and as a result, the failure rate dipped below the magic 50%. Well, Chairman, the recommendations that came from taxi licensing, you had on the night of the meeting a gentleman presenting this wonderful app. The 650 drivers, and there were some councillors who were present in this room who actually said that some of their drivers would not be able to use the app. And in fact, I think Councillor Aslam said that there was 28 drivers in Pendle who don't even have a smartphone. I think they have the old Nokia bricks that some of us will remember. And Councillor McGrady's solution to that was to put more pressure on our officers and say that training would be afforded to all taxi drivers within 3 months. Now, how he's going to manage to train 650 odd drivers in 3 months is beyond me. But it places an additional pressure on our officers who are already overworked. In terms of some of the consultation, I mean, if you look at consultation, statistics are good. And Councillor Corbyn Price has asked, is 180 a good figure? Well, Councillor McGrady says there's no political motive here, but if you read some of the comments on the consultation, they are totally off skew in terms of what the question was asked. And in the trade response, he's been on Facebook and people will have seen this, where he says that the majority of the trade were in support of his proposals. Well, in case you've not read the consultation, 76% of the trade were against what he was proposing. 80% of the public were in favour, but again, if you drill down into some of the comments there, that figure drops below 50%. The reality is, Chairman, you have to sit down with the trade to agree on, because at the end of the day, they're going to work it, I'm not going to work it, you're not going to work it, and Councillor McGladdy is clearly not going to work it. You cannot implement something without actually speaking to the people that are actually going to deliver it. So my proposal last week was to defer for a working group, but I'm actually going to suggest something else, that this committee sets up a task and finish group that sits down with the trade, 3 representatives, 1 from each political party, and 3 reps from the trade, and they actually sit in a room, as used to happen under the late Tony Greaves. I sat in one meeting, and under Councillor David Clegg, and under Councillor Pauline McCormick, and under different guises of chairmen and leaders of the council, myself included, where you said, right, this is the issue, how we're going to deal with it. You will only get something that's workable by working with the trade. And for Councillor McGladdy to come here and try and patronise the trade, I think is insulting. He may think that it's all good and well for his political purposes to do that, but the reality is, the comment that he's put on Facebook are totally distorted. So, for example, he says that Labour voted against his proposal and the Liberal Democrats abstained. The fact is that Councillor Brian Newman actually supported the original motion because he had to move an amendment to get through what he wanted and was making policy upon the hoof. But Chairman, I would urge councillors to note this particular report tonight, set up something that's workable, and if the trade come to that task and finish group and say this isn't going to work, fine, you come back as leader of the council if you still are, and say they've come back with absolutely nothing. You've heard an offer that they'll sit down and discuss and agree with something. They walk out of that room with something that's going to work to protect not only the public of Pendle. The one thing that Councillor McGladry is forgetting is that the person that drives that taxi is in that taxi for whatever hours they work every day. It's his or her life that's at stake first, the public comes second. But work with the trade, set up a task and finish group, and you'll come up with a solution.
Thank you. Any speakers? Anyone else want to come in for
I'd like to ask Mr Watson what he thinks about some of these thoughts.
Chairman, I thought some of them were political points. I don't really want to get drawn on those, I'm afraid.
Okay, some of the assertions then, not the thoughts, but the assertions.
Could you be more specific about which ones you wanted to comment on?
In terms of how workable would these proposals be?
In terms of workability, there are a lot of people to train, so that's one of the issues. But once you download an app, and the vast majority of people now can download an app, it's actually quite a simple thing to work. You need to set up an account, and it's a £1 per vehicle per week. So you equate that to, if you're doing a paper exercise, it's similar to that.
So if I owned a taxi, it would cost me £50 a year, assuming I had 2 weeks holiday.
Yes. In terms of using an app, yes, there will be some people who won't be able to, but the app that we've looked at and was demonstrated, if you have some abilities with a phone, and I looked actually at the last week and at the taxi trade that was there, and virtually every one of them was on the phone. So the vast majority do have smartphones, and maybe the odd exception. I think you can learn to use that app reasonably well in 10 minutes.
Okay.
That's Chad.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I echo very much what has already been said by some of the taxi trade people and Councillor Iqbal. I mean, safety is paramount, it's crucial. We protect the public, but there are already systems in place to do that and to address those safety issues. We have MOT, regular MOT tests that taxi trade have to perform during the year. So something's failing somewhere. If some of the issues that have been highlighted about the oil leaks and the wind vipers in summer and the nuts and bolts, I mean, there are some major issues, but they don't happen overnight. They don't happen within a couple of weeks. No doubt they've been happening over a couple of months. And at the stage of the MOT station test, those should be highlighted. And when they get highlighted, obviously that car will fail and that will get rectified. And then no doubt that will go for another test and that will either pass or fail again. So I think the system is already in place if that is doing their job properly, if that makes sense. Another way of thinking is possibly you could do more spot checks. And if you do more spot checks and regular checks, again, the issues that have been highlighted, they'll be picked up round there, and then they can be rectified. I mean, I had an example. I got approached by one of the taxi drivers whose car was taken off the road. I think he had one light on the mirror which was not working, and his car was taken off the road. And it's failed, and he had to go through everything again to get it passed, which I thought was a bit harsh, generally to say. And by introducing the apps and other things, and I think that's going to add extra burden financially, time-wise, in the current climate. Again, I think that's very harsh with the cost of living crisis. So what I'm proposing is simple. Obviously, I think Councillor Iqbal's touched on it. Generally, the committee thanks all those who responded to the consultation on taxi safety in Pendle. The committee notes the recommendation of Taxi Licensing Committee, which show a lack of support from the trade. The committee sets up a task and finish group to include 3 representatives of the trade and 3 councillors, one from Labour, one from Liberal and one from Conservatives, to look at the improvements in taxi safety and associated issues affecting taxi trade. The thing is, again, it's been highlighted previously, I don't know, I'm repeating things in a way. It has worked previously, and I know Councillor David Clegg and Councillor Paul McCormick, especially David Clegg, I think worked very closely with taxi trade. And if there were any issues, they were, they sat around the table, highlighted the issues, and they all overcame those and found a solution. I think that can be achieved again if the will is there. Obviously, council says it's not political, 100% it's political. So I think it's crucial that, you know, as a council, we support the taxi trade and we work together to help both the public that use the services and also the people that provide the service. So I move.
Who seconded? Any of the councillors?
Could I just come before you? Just another question then, just in the same way. So, should the council do more spot checks in your opinion?
The answer to that is no, because well, we can only spot check a certain number of vehicles, and those vehicles, when they have a spot check, then if the policy is the same, they just go and fix it and go away. That's not going to give a sea change to the trade, because when we do spot checks, they are random, and when those whatever random pattern we've got of vehicles, they are not all failing, but a significant amount of failing. So I don't think increasing spot checks will get to enough drivers and vehicles and will result in any change. It's got to be, shall we say, in the DNA of drivers and operators that every day their vehicles are checked to be safe. And as Councillor Gladdery says, there's other legislation which requires that.
Okay, final question from me then. So 2 speakers have said that there've been long-term faults that can't just appear overnight, and they've prefaced that with they're not mechanical engineers, and neither am I. And so there's some kind of sense that in some way Pendle Council is to blame for not spotting these long-term faults before.
Chairman, that sentiment is just not right. Pendle Borough Council is not in any way responsible for the individual maintenance of a vehicle. We have responsibilities to make sure the trade is safe, because that's one of the licensing objectives that we have, but some of the faults may well be caused by going over a bump and having an impact, but all tyres aren't. Wear on brakes isn't an instant issue. Lack of wheel nuts isn't an issue. And all these are things that if you had your own vehicle, I don't know whether everybody drives, but the vast majority of us, you know in your vehicle if these things are happening. So there is in my view, and forgive me if I'm going too far, there's an apathy that needs to change.
Got Councillor Hanifa, then Kieran again.
Thank you. Chair, through yourself, can I ask Neil a question? Neil, there's a triangle here. Council, the taxi trade, and the MOT stations. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll go with that. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So obviously we're talking about the taxi trade, and we know what the officers do. Question is with the MOT stations, how often do we make sure they're doing their job? Because if you have brakes, okay, I've got mine tested 6 weeks ago, and he said to me straight away, they're going to run away. Your brake pad is going to go in 4 weeks. Can you get them changed, please? I said yes. All tyres, oil leaks, fine. So if they're having oil leaks and these things a month after, for example, isn't that an issue for the MOT station? Isn't that our issue then as a council to making sure? So over the 6 years I've been here, we always focus, and I accept not all taxi drivers are maybe not doing 100%, that's fine. Majority are good people, they work honestly, they're doing an honest living, they work hard. But what is the council doing? In the last 6 years, I haven't seen anything where we enforce and check the MOT stations. So, through yourself, Chair, can I ask, I know we're focusing all on this, but because it's a triangle, our team is doing the work, council officers are doing the work. The taxi drivers are doing the work, okay, spot checks and everything else. But what in the last 6 years have we done with the MOT stations? Please could you advise on that?
Well, I know that one of the council staff goes down there very regularly and attends checks and looks through those. Obviously, there's a decision made to have more testing stations, which doesn't allow us to go down as frequently, but one of the proposals in here is to have an MOT test, and there will then be MOT stations subject to VOSA regulations, so that will add some rigour in terms of standards, that one of the concerns that you've just raised, and that's part of the proposals here, to have an MOT test, and they're obviously administered by a national agency, and they have standards that they would expect those garages to have.
Chair, can I have a follow-up question?
Yeah, of course you can.
With all these obviously faults identified, has the council gone, this car 1820 cars of failed, whatever the list is, yes? And these are the cars. Have they backtracked to which MOT station? Because what we're doing is we're just blaming the cars. That's fine. I have no problems with that. The tyres bolt, or you change them or anything. But how do we know which MOT stations are not doing the job right? So we should be also backtracking and saying, is this a regular thing with Joe Blanc MOT station, Hanif MOT station, or whichever it is? It might be something which we're missing out, and they're not doing the job. They're making loads of money on it. So isn't it our responsibility as Pendle Council to backtrack and say, look, do the figures, which some MOTs will be fantastic. But like any business, there's some might be not perfect. So it's our job as well to backtrack and say, is it just perfect MOT stations, or is there a handful of MOT stations who are not doing the job right? They're getting paid, but who suffers is the taxi drivers when they get stopped on the tyres or the oil leaks or the brakes, that you give an example. That's not their fault 4 weeks after the test. If the brake pad can't just wear off. MOT station will tell you it's fine, it will last so long. Mine does all the time. Every year I go, he will say to you, and if you've got 6 months, you've got 2 weeks, it will actually give me some indication. So I'm saying that's also our responsibility, to backtrack and say which MOT and start looking at those. If we need to take their license away, let's take their license away and bring in proper ones.
Thank
Thank you, Chair.
Kieran?
Thank you. Just to pick on some of the comments there, I think we've got another red herring in the room. We heard from some speakers that the potholes, that's the first red herring. They're not the root cause of even 5% of the issues that we see on the spot check results. The other red herring is the one that's been spoken about by Mr Hanif just there, Councillor Hanif. The testing stations just aren't the issue either. The problems and the failure rates, failure reasons, that we see in, the bolt tyres, the windscreen wiper that Councillor referred to. On that particular evening, it was absolutely chucking it down, and the driver rocked up with the windscreen wiper attached by maybe 2 inches. That wasn't wear and tear. That would happen over a long period of time. That's just an example. So the point is, the testing stations, they're just not the root cause of the issue. With respect to speakers so far, you haven't been on the committee, you haven't attended the working groups that we have set up, and you haven't attended the workshops on the road. It's a bit of an unfair statement to say that the committee and some of the members haven't worked tirelessly with the work with the garages, with the trade that have come to the working groups, and that we haven't put on sufficient means of communication from the frequency of them, the availability of the committee and its members. It's just not true. We have worked extremely hard on the road and in official council committee meetings. We have been available all the time, and I have attended numerous meetings with members. The crux of this is, members, we know what will solve these issues that we're seeing, and that is for the drivers to undertake the daily safety checks. That was promised during multiple working groups that I've been chairman for the last 2 years, and it's just not happened. Another working group won't net any improvement or any other ideas. As Mr Watson said, we've sort of exhausted it, and we've gone to the trade and experts in terms of the garage and the doors engineers that we spoke to on ideas, and the proposals as they are seem to be the best on the market, for want of a better phrase. The solution is for the drivers, and it's, again, with respect to the operators, these policies are taking the onus off you as operators and putting it onto the drivers. The drivers get in the car every single day or every single shift. We're asking the drivers to check the vehicles. It's not a terribly overbearing exercise to do. I've had a few run-throughs outside of the committee last week. We had one with a member on Sunday, and it took 4 minutes 37 seconds around to do a full, comprehensive, decent check, which on the app with all the issues, well, there were no issues on the car that we tested it on. It was my car, just a walk around of the car, and it covered all the basics that we would expect and ask of the drivers. Look under the hood, is there a significant leak? No. These are simple questions. Check your tyres, are they bald? No. Check your lights, are they all operating? Yes. And so on and so on. There's around 15 basic questions. Check your brakes, etc., etc. It's not going too far. And as I stated before in my opening statement, Chairman, this isn't optional. The Hazardware legislation, which is the Health and Safety at Work Act, another transport industry specific legislation, says that this is mandatory. We've discussed it at committee multiple times and in the working groups. They have to do this, but they're not. So this app, it's not a word that I like to use, but it is going to compel the trade to undertake the basic legal requirements, and by doing so, we'll see an immediate improvement because they'll have to do the daily checks. The issues that we see at the spot checks, the failure rates, I think we would have been under 10% easily on the last spot check, 15 out of 16 that failed. Had the daily checks taken place, we would have probably had 1 if not 2 vehicles fail that day. And I would have bought the whole borough of Pecores if that had been the case. Or Pints, should they wish to take that instead. It's a serious policy. I've got a serious concern based on what I've seen as chairman of this committee, and the engagement from the trade and the promises that are being made. We have tried hard and nothing has been delivered. Again, I'm fearful that a serious incident's going to happen on the road, and I think it requires a name vote if this policy isn't passed, because somebody needs to be culpable when somebody gets hurt on the roads.
Yeah, my understanding is you can't have a non-name voters. It's not full council. It's a
Okay, well that's fine. I think.
David.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've talked a lot about how it's organised, the triangle of interested stakeholders, etc. And we've talked a lot about legal responsibilities. I take the view that it's not just a triangle, because it ultimately depends on the customers. The taxi trade is nowhere unless the customers have the confidence to call up the firms and say, I'd like a taxi please. And when I get into a taxi, I get taxis occasionally, not a huge amount. I do have a car, and as Mr. Alden said, I do basic checks now and again. But I think I want to get into a taxi and feel safe. And I want you, the drivers, to feel safe as well. Because otherwise, scary things like 15 out of 16 failing is the sort of thing that undermines confidence. People are prepared to pay for a safe taxi ride. And I think the fact that we have legal obligations, the Health and Safety at Work Act, we've got the Transport Act, the council is bound by those, the trade is bound by those, and we want to know that everything's being done properly by the trade, by the garages, and by Pendle. And I think just making sure all that fits together. I mean, we look at the report we've got today, and let's talk about surveys and let's talk about the numbers, etc. But the final conclusion paragraph says the public perception is they don't feel safe travelling in our licensed vehicle, and this must be reversed. And the only way to do this is to have a robust policy with sanctions for licence holders who are not willing to look after their vehicles. Over many, many, many years, seemingly, different ideas have been suggested by different committee members, etc., and they don't seem to be working. You know, numbers may go up or down, There may be courts involved as well, you know, in terms of bringing sanctions in, and to be able to do those, to get somewhere well below 50% failure rate, if, as Kieran says, we can get down to 10% or 15, 20% or so, that's still not great, but I think it's one of those ones whereby we have to do something now to actually put this in place to make it safe for everybody. I don't want it so a taxi driver gets up in the morning, doesn't bother to do a check, gets in the same vehicle, crashes on the way to work and dies. I don't want that. I don't want you picking up a passenger and both of you dying. This is not what we want. This is about safety. That's the key fundamental. I think we've got a sheet of paper here which has on a big long list of all the recommendations that came from the taxi licensing committee. I think if we are going to introduce a new system with the health checks, the daily health checks on the app, then I think that's part of it. And I think all of these recommendations seem valid and seem worth supporting. I think the only one I might suggest is, because I'm keen to almost give the trade a chance to get it right, reassure us, give us the confidence, give customers the confidence. So, you know, if we're proposing MOTs, number one here, to go from 2 to 3, just keep it at 2 for the time being, so we can almost remove that one for the time being. As Councillor Hanif said, let's go back to those that have failed tests and let's see what the MOT garages that look after them are doing. If there is a common thread, then standards need to improve with those, right? But I think I would move the recommendations from 2 to 8, and say we should implement them, and let's improve everything out. Let's make it safe for everybody, and let's make it a trade that we're proud of. Is that an amendment then, I suppose? Or yes, is that an amendment?
Yeah. Is there a seconder?
I want to speak.
Yeah, I'll bring you in. There's a, yeah.
I'll second.
Is that seconded? Okay. Councillor Iqbal and then Councillor.
Thanks, Chairman. Can I just share with you the results of the last spot check? And Councillor McGrady boasts about this app. There wasn't a single car that failed on tyres. Not a single car that failed on bald tyres. 5 out of 40 failed on excessive oil leaks. Now, if you look at the app that was demonstrated, what you're asking the driver to do is look at the tyres, look at the lights, look at the brakes, make sure the steering wheel's there, make sure there's enough diesel and petrol in the car for him to drive. There is no way a driver is going to be able to spot an excessive oil leak unless they physically get into the car.
Personal explanation, Chairman.
Well, he's not at full council, so he doesn't have a personal explanation. But Chairman, and if you look at the 14 cars that were tested, of those, only 3 are things that would satisfy the daily app test. So in terms of the wheel stud missing, and I assume the wheel stud is where, I'm sure your posh car, Chairman, has a locking wheel nut on every wheel. And my understanding is from talking to officers, is that where the locking wheel nut thing has disappeared, the garage will have to chop that wheel nut off in order to take the tyre off. And obviously, yeah, it's the driver's responsibility to make sure that it goes back on. But if you look at the 13 that failed the last spot check, 8 out of 14 are things that the driver won't even be able to spot. In terms of the recommendations that Councillor McGrady talked about, he said that the operators are not going to be penalised. But if you look at the first recommendation, it talks about where there's 50% of failures for a firm, the operator will have their licence reviewed by Neil, as though Neil hasn't got much else to do. The original recommendation was that their licence would be revoked, which I think was too draconian. But again, if we look at the consultation responses, and maybe Councillor McGrady and the Taxi Licence Committee didn't study these in detail, well, let me just share with you that related to vehicles, there was 2 comments that said they were death traps. Most of the comments were the usage should be recorded when sold with the correct mileage, should have an internal camera, should have a dash cam, a tracker for parents to track journeys, too many on the road, licence number on doors, and you need to give a discount of £1,500 per annum for an emissions charge. So the question that was asked of the public and the trade, the majority of the public have deviated, no disrespect to any member of the public that responded, but they didn't really answer or comment on the question that was asked in terms of vehicle safety. So I would urge the committee not to support the amendment that's been moved, have a sensible approach, set up a task and finish group. The onus is on the trade then to come up with some positive solutions, and if they don't, I'll be the first one to stand up and support Councillor McGrady and say the trade are to blame. The trade are not to blame. He talks about having working group meetings. There are 3-4 trade reps here. He's not had a single meeting with them in the last 2 years, so God knows who he's been meeting.
Kieran, do you want to come back in? Then we're going to move this debate forward.
Yeah, it's a simple comment. The app would have recorded all 5 instances of those severe oil leaks. It didn't need to be mechanic. All 5 of them had, if you lifted the body, essentially, I was there at the spot check. You're not talking about a mechanical issue where you have to get underneath. The engine bay was absolutely covered in oil. That's what one of the checks would be on the app. It wasn't a minor leak that an engineer or a mechanic would find under. You're talking about popping the hood and excessive oil was... the Vosa engineer commented that any one of those 5 that failed could have burst into flames imminently because of the heat and dripping onto the exhaust system. It's just such a shame that Councillor Iqbal and some of the comments that I've made so far just aren't listening to the committee's recommendations and experience that has been cited by Neil as well over I've had 16 years worth of comments from one member of this committee that what we're going around in circles, the spot checks, the promises that have been made just haven't happened. I agree with Councillor Corbyn Price's amendment there. The app will deal with the situation.
I'll just make some comments on some of the debate and then bring in Councillor Aslan. I think there is a serious issue here in terms of the failure rate on the spot checks. But I think that needs to be broken down further in terms of it's not as straightforward as having a failure rate and that's what it is. I think it depends on what the reasons for the failure are. Some will be more serious than others, but I accept a failure is a failure. I think it's slightly disappointing to hear some of the comments from the trade, I must say, is that there haven't been discussions with members. I know for a fact there have been discussions, and I'm also disappointed that this has been ongoing for 18 months, and yet no sensible proposals have been agreed between the taxi trade and councillors. In terms of some of the comments made about the MOT station, I think yes, I think that needs to be followed up. But some of the examples which were given in terms of the faults, I think you've got to break them down in terms of the faults. Some of them could, in my view, be faults which can be instant. For example, the wipers issue was mentioned, that could just be broken in a day or come off. The oil leaks, who's to say when a car's going to start leaking oil? It could be a week after it's been tested, who knows. Brake pads, yes. I think that is a gradual process, and if a vehicle's been tested, say 2 weeks before at an MOT station, and then in a spot check fails it, I think that raises concerns and that needs to be looked into. But I think there's clearly, from the committee members, the 2 sides of the debate. One is, yes, we need to press ahead with the recommendations from the Taxi Licensing Committee. And then there's the other argument in terms of possibly deferring this and having further discussions between the council and the taxi trade. I just want to clarify with Kieran, the recommendations which, or the proposal moved by, I think it was Councillor David Corbyn Price, are they correct?
So, Chairman, so thank you. In terms of the sanctions,
because I'm going to be perfectly frank, is I don't feel comfortable with somebody's operator's licence being revoked by an officer. I think that is something that is so important. I think there has to be member involvement. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
So I have submitted a revision of the sanctions, and the sanctions have been amended from operator have the licence reviewed by essentially the officers to bring that to committee for the first 6 months where the issues are app related. Thereafter, it would defer back to the planning and Neil Watson essentially and his team. Happy to have that revised again so the committee decides on any sanctions. So just for clarity again, sorry, the old sanctions as per the agenda item do say that the operator would have the licence reviewed by Planning and Economic Development Regulatory Services Manager. The amendment that I passed to David earlier was that the operator would have the licence reviewed by the committee for the first 6 months of the new policy thereafter by the officers. Because there's got to be a bedding in period, there's a lot to learn and a lot to get used to. I do agree that it's, for most people, a PDF app, 10 minutes will be sufficient training for 99% of the population. And a lot of the sanctions and triggers are nothing new, they're existing. I think the other amendment that David made there was to cancel the 3 tests per year and keep it at 2. So essentially, Chairman, all the current amendment is the application, which will compel the drivers to perform the data checks.
Councillor Aslan.
Can I put a question to Neil? How many cars are there, taxis, in total, roughly?
350.
Pardon?
350.
350.
Sorry, but they are increasing. They've increased a lot recently.
Right.
Sort of changing policies elsewhere.
When there's a spot check, I've been trying to find out how an officer, whoever, brings the cars, a visual leach around the car, their defects are only the ones are picked up and brought to the garage. Near enough 70% of the cars which are possible, there's no faults on it, are never ever picked up on a spot check and brought to the garage. I never found out till now how come if a visual check has been done by a driver, because I do a visual check, I'm a Midas test driver, I'm also a motor mechanic, and I do drive for the rally school. I do a visual check before I sit in the car and drive for the good safety check. Simple check, a driver goes around, finds fault. If that has been doing for the last 18 months, then I reckon the percentage of the failure would be 10%. Because there's hardly many cars have failed on a spot check underneath the car. So, what has been brought up here on this, there's something I agree and mostly which I disagree on it. And if you want to vote by number 1, 2, 3 and 4. It's very simple, so simple. How does an officer bring a car for a spot check? Do you know?
It's the police, Chairman.
Sorry.
Clarify.
Pardon?
It's the police that bring it in with the officers.
Can you go through?
Yeah. So this is what I've never found out here. And they always the cars which have the faults around the car, and that's the reason why the percentage comes higher.
Is it
Just to clarify, it is, Chairman. So what happens at the spot check is we'll have police officers in a marked vehicle with blues and twos. The police go out on the road with one of the officers, and whatever vehicle they come across, they bring in for a spot check. They don't pick and choose what is the worst vehicle that they come across. It is the first vehicle that come across that is escorted back sometimes or told to come in for a spot check.
Chairman, he's factually wrong there. Ask the trade how they picked out.
Well, it wasn't the last spot check. I'm referencing the last
Right,
spot
okay,
check.
thank you. Councillor Wick.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a matter of safety, and it has been a concern for a long number of years. Councillor David Clegg's name was invoked by various speakers, and during his chairmanship of the committee, there were some inroads into the failure rates. But even if you look at failure rates of just below 50%, that is an extraordinary number of vehicles that, given that it's a sample, apparently a random sample, it's an extraordinary number of vehicles that aren't in tip-top condition. And I think for most of the people in Pendle, residents, taxi drivers, the travelling public, that is of grave concern. I can't comment about the consultation that's been carried out. I've not been part of that consultation. It appears that there are failures. Things could have been differently and perhaps more inclusive, and we might not have been in the position that we're in tonight, but we are where we are. And it is true, and I have sympathy with people who are complaining about the condition of the roads, because there are some atrocious road conditions. However, none of that excuses having taxis that apparently aren't being checked on a daily basis, and as a consequence are going out on the road in a condition that it is not safe. Now, I note that Councillor McGladdery was talking about, amendments to the proposal, but clearly what was proposed was what's written here, with the exception of increasing the number of tests per year from 2 to 3. So I'm going off what's on the sheet here, and I and my group would support the proposals as written, and that's how I'll be voting.
Yeah, but I'm a bit confused now, so I just want to clarify. Which sheet are you, because I think, yeah.
It's on the table. Chairman, can I just, my amendment was originally obviously to go with exactly what's written on here, but following Councillor McGladdery's clarifications, I think the idea of this sort of bedding in period, just like we talked about with the MOT tests, I think it's resolution 3 and 6 are the ones that rather escalate straight away to poor Mr Watson, who's overworked anyway, but go for that sort of 6-month review by the committee, and then an escalation afterwards if it's not solved. So you've got that bedding in period, we can review it, see how it works, and then take it from there. So it brings it in slowly, and it allows the trade to get their head around what's required to do, and it can start to reassure the public, start to, firms and drivers can start to do marketing and say, I do this fine, you're safe in my taxi, etc. I think that would be excellent to reassure people. So a slight tweak to numbers 3 and 6 to fall in line with what Kieran suggested.
Any speakers?
Chairman, I'd like some clarity on what exactly has been proposed there. Is it to replace the words planning, economic development, regulatory service manager with the taxi
Could I ask
licensing
Kieran to
committee?
just clarify so it's,
Chair.
Chairman, I'm asking through you to the mover of the proposal.
Yeah, can you explain to David, and then because he's moved it, so he'll have to clarify it, please.
Yeah, what we're saying.
This is not right.
What we're saying, number 3, is that rather than say over a 1-year period, it's straight escalated to be reviewed by Mr Watson. What we're saying is the operators to have their licence reviewed by the committee for the first 6 months of the policy, and then you've got the escalation to Mr Watson. And the same is true also of number 6, where again it's to have the licence reviewed by the committee for the first 6 months of the new policy, and then to go to Mr Watson.
Which page are you looking at, Mr Chair? It's not here.
This one.
No. David, do you want to...
Chairman, well, it now smacks of making this up on the hoof, because the clause 3, as it's written, says a failure of 50% of vehicles tested of an operator over a period of 1 year to result in an operator having their licence reviewed. Now, you're saying that for 6 months any such review would go to the committee. But, unless a year has passed, you've got no 50% over a year. So I don't see how a 6 months insertion in that makes any difference. Are we taking that it's 50% over 6 months? So you're actually making it a more onerous requirement. I'm sorry, but you know, you're confusing the issue, to be quite
No, I'm
frank.
not confusing the issue. I've not moved anything.
Well,
I'm confused.
The issue is being confused.
Yeah.
Well, I'm quite happy to go for the year then.
Yeah.
As you say, it makes it workable. But I'll...
Chairman, if I could make a last comment, I appreciate...
Last comment.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate Councillor Whip's comments there. The idea of the first 6 months bringing it to committee was to bed in the policy and to ensure that it works and to review all instances where operator or driver has fallen foul to make sure that the policy works. However, that was more of a comfort blanket, if you will, for the trade. I'm more than happy for Mr Watson to make that decision, because he's more than capable of. So if I dare ask David, Councillor Corbyn Price to perhaps rescind that, Neil is more than capable of making the decisions. The idea was so that the trade would perhaps have more faith and comfort in the committee to making those decisions. That was the purpose of it, so that you can come in and have that dialogue. But rescind that section by all means, and Neil Watson will make those decisions.
Are we, Councillor, is that clearer?
I just think we need to be clear about what's been moved within the committee and what we're actually voting on. And it needs to make sense. There's no point having a 6 month review over something that's a 12-month period.
So the suggestion is that we leave number 3 as it's written, with Mr Watson to have the discretion then to refer it to the taxi committee.
This is a failure of 50% of tester vehicles. Is that the paragraph you're looking at?
Yes, number 3. Yeah.
Resulting up on the last review. So it's the discretion of Neil. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Doesn't have to, but may do.
Doesn't have to, but may.
Okay. Councillor Iqbal, last time please.
Councillor Whip is 200% right. This is policy on the hoof. You've got something that came from taxi licensing, that was changed at taxi licensing. Councillor Corbyn Price has moved something. Councillor McLeod, who's not even a member of this committee, seems to be dictating which way or route it needs to go. But then keep chopping and changing. Councillor Whip asked a valid question, and he's then saying to Councillor Corbyn Price, no, go back to what originally was moved. This is policy on the hoof. This is not fair, not just on the taxi trade, but the people of Pendle. We can't have a non-committee member dictating to you how policy should be made. You should have sought that advice beforehand, and you can't simply say to the recommendation that Neil chooses whether to refer it or not. There's no democratic accountability in terms of what taxi licensing sent to you. And as councillors, we're democratically elected to serve the people of Pendle. It's not fair on Neil to take the rap for every case that he revokes or otherwise. And who's going to decide whether he refers it or not? Is it just down to Neil or is it not? So it is policy on the hoof, and that's why I moved something that was sensible earlier on.
Any other speakers? No. Okay, in terms of, so there's, I think Councillor Aschad moved the original and then there's an amendment. In terms of the amendment, are you accepting any of them changes? None? Okay, that's fine. So we have, we'll take the amendment first, which was moved by Councillor David Corbyn Price. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Is it down to me? Yeah, I mean, my view on this is, I think this is a really difficult decision that we need to take. It's something which we have discussed for a long, long time, and I think it's a shame there hasn't been any sort of resolution to how we move forward I do have concerns as to how we are moving forward. Public safety is paramount, but I think it needs to be done in a way which works for the members of the public and also the trade as well. I think because if we don't have a working relationship between the council and the taxi trade, my view is the policy or whatever decision we take will be unworkable. I have to take the difficult choice. I think we do have to give this some further consideration. There has to be further discussions. But what I want to make clear is, if I'm the leader of the council after the elections, maybe, may not be, the taxi trade have to come up with some firm proposals. What we can't keep having is, I've been on the council long enough and I've been listening to the excuses. I'm not being rude, I've been listening to the trade's excuses. You're not coming out with any serious suggestions, you're not coming out with any proposals. All you say is no to everything, and that has to stop. It can't continue. You have to come up with something that's workable, so we as a council are protected. At the moment, Kieran's quite right in terms of some of the failure rates, because if something happens, the council potentially is in jeopardy and we're in some serious trouble. But what I don't want to see is a policy which may be unworkable. So I'm going to say that we defer this item for further discussions. So I'll go with the so I'm voting for that reason. So that's considered. We have to take the vote.
That's not carried, so that amendment isn't carried. So.
Yeah. So we have to go back to the original motion moved by Aschad. So all those in favour, please show. Against? So it's down to cast and vote again. Yep. Yep. So I'll vote with the decision to defer.
Chairman, could I request that my vote against that decision is recorded in the minutes?
Yep.
And also mine.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go back to the agenda. Thank you. If those people who want to leave, by all means you can leave. Can someone get that? Yeah, okay. We've got officers here, so what I want to do is bring items 7 and 8 forward, please. So item 7 is air quality annual status. Can you introduce that before? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I'm Michael Dork, I'm the commercial team leader. I met some of you before, for those who don't know me. Part of the remit of the commercial team is to do with air quality. So I'm happy here to present to yourselves tonight the current clean air strategy for 2020 to 2021. I'd like to share the good news with yourselves that in general air quality across Pendle is improving. Not only we're improving the health of residents, but also businesses and people who actually come and stay and visit the borough. This is also contributing to climate change emergency, which was declared in 2019, and some of the positive work which Pendle Borough Council is doing and good initiatives undertaken, such as tree planting and low emissions fleet and vehicles. Pendle Borough Council has a statutory responsibility to monitor air across the borough. with the pollutant being of concern, oxides of nitrogen, otherwise known as NOx. The main source of NOx arises from vehicle emissions. There's health hazards that are associated with oxides of nitrogen and is recognised to have adverse health effects, primarily to respiratory diseases and other associated health causes. So how do we actually monitor NOx within the borough? Well, what should we actually use is these NOx tubes, and I'll just share these across to yourselves. So these are non-continuous NOx tubes that are situated around 50 different places around the borough, from Barrowford, Briarfield, Nelson and Colne. On a monthly basis we go out and replace the NOx tubes and send them off for analysis. The analysis from the NOx tubes in 2011 exceeded the national air quality standards of 40 micrograms per cubic metre. This resulted in us declaring an air quality management plan, which was for code, that incorporates Skipton Road, up to Skipton Road roundabout, incorporates Windsor Street, down to Skipton Road roundabout, Skipton Road, and also at the edge of Oak Street. On reviewing the results, we can all agree that 2020 was an atypical year due to COVID-19. This saw a massive decrease in NOx in comparison to 2019 and 2021 due to the lockdown. If we compare the results of NOx levels from the following locations of the air quality management area from 2017 to 2020, we can demonstrate an improvement in air quality that is below the national air quality standard. So for example, on 60 Windsor Street in Colne, which is in the air quality management area, the following readings were taken. 2017, 39.9, which is just below the threshold. 2018, 30.5. 2019, 29.9. 2020, 18.23. But obviously that was due to COVID, which was particularly low. And then 2021, 23. Again, I'll give you another example, again in the air quality management area, at 100 Skipton Road, Colne. So 2017, 29.4. 2018, 28.1. 2019, 27.1. 2020, 18.4. And 2021, 19. With similar results across other areas of the borough. So I'll give you an example at 62 Burnley Road in Briarfield. 2018, 38.8. 2019, 34.7. 2020, 26.9. And 2021, 27.8. Another area, Barrowford, and you've got to know the final area I'm going to cover as part of this. 2018, 28.1. 2019, 28.9. Slight increase there, but 2020, 20.4, and 21, 24. So how did we get to these actual results itself? Well, we can't do this on our own, and we've been in partnership with Lancashire County Council, and from that we've produced an action plan in order to reduce the NOx. So what we've done with LCC and other partners is to increase the uptake and implementation of travel plans, contribute and influence development policies in partnership with LCC, working with LCC to improve traffic flow, easing congestion and reducing idling traffic, And I think in the whole, that has been the main contribution to reducing NOx, in addition to more efficient fuels and vehicles. Working in partnership with planning to encourage air quality and climate change through new developments, and encouraging behavioural change away from car use and promoting alternative methods. In conclusion, it's great news for Pendle that the level of NOx are reducing, improving air quality and health, contributing to Pendle Council's ongoing commitment to climate change. The committee is asked to note the air quality status report for 2020-21 with the progress made against the action plan.
Thank you very much. David.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for your report. One thing I was sparked in the interest of this one because it was quite a thing we looked at in depth when we had the planning appeal for the RUF back in 2016. Obviously, it predates these numbers, but at the time we had some really biggish numbers, well into the 40s, I think, and it's one, well, even more, yeah. And it's one of those things as well that I think as the detailed to the monthly breakdown figures on the sort of pages in the 30s say, I know that a lot of those obviously show that there is a degree of movement during the year. And we know that when the weather's heavy and it's wintry, etc., that the numbers are going to be a bit higher. The NOx can't escape. But in summertime, they tend to float away. It's all rather good. I think looking at the AQMA area, it's on page 41 and page 42, then obviously we've got a series of sensors along there, which I think you read out a couple of examples, and as you say, the numbers seem to be going down. Obviously the COVID impact in 2021 and 2020 have been quite good. Interested to hear what happens in 2022 though, to see whether it's perked back up again, because we all know that the North Valley Road is rather busy. I think I also noticed as well that there seem to be, in these marvellous tables, there seem to be a few of the sensors, the ones that we used to look at, number 31, number 55, 56 and 57 for example, which we have no data at all for. So I wonder if they've just been decommissioned. Again, I know in the past as well, whether they're the ones that used to be the automatic ones. Because one of the things, we had a particularly talented bloke in our team. He was a doctor of chemistry, worked at Rolls-Royce, knew everything about science and everything, and he used to look at this data really quite extensively and thinking, well, people are going to wander to school on that road, Archive's not a million miles along there, and therefore we use that data quite a lot. I understand that we don't do any automatic data collection anymore, because the various sensors we did have, which did update daily data, hourly data, etc., they don't work anymore. One thing I did clarify with Mr. Spur was the fact that we did get a section 106 from the RUF when it was put in, and we haven't collected the money. And it goes to air quality, one thing. So perhaps we could use the £3,000 from that and actually, maybe get some of this automatic reading going again. So I think overall it's a good thing that obviously the numbers are coming down, so I'm pleased to see that overall. I do wish we could do some more automatic monitoring, put that back in place again. It relieves the burden on the people having to go out and collect these little tubes all the time. So if we can do that, that would be good. Yeah, so I'd just like to make note of that.
Councillor Whip.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid, Mr. Duck, this is a bit of a curveball. Obviously, this report is about NOx, and it's not the only source of air pollution in Pendle. So we've got quite a lot of particulate matter, which may be caused by diesel engines, but from the rough and ready tests that I do, I smell quite a lot of wood smoke, and that is supposedly one of the biggest ways that particulate matter gets into the environment, and it's a particularly nasty pollution in terms of bronchial problems and the like. So I'm going to ask you what measures are in place to actually monitor the pollution from wood smoke, and it's all about air quality,
Yeah.
but I know it's not within this legislation,
So
but Clean Air Act.
yeah, so there's two parts to how I'm going to sort of answer your concern. So there's certain areas in the borough are in smoke control areas, and there's legislation that was passed last year under the Environment Act in relation to smoke control areas and what you burn, basically, and the amount of moisture within the content of the actual wood that you're burning. Obviously, we would police that. If we had any concerns or any complaints, we'd follow that up and investigate it. So that's in relation to smoke control. Particulate matter is also recognised within the Environment Act last year, and it will be something in years to come that we will actively be monitoring, and the reason for that is a legislative requirement for us to actually monitor for particulate matter. So the way I see it is that basically NOx is going to reduce, we hope, with more efficient fuels and people moving over to EVs, and there will be more sort of monitoring of particulate matter and PM2s in particular, and we're currently waiting for the air quality standard to be produced in relation to particulate matter, and then at that particular point we'll start going out and doing some monitoring for it. So it will be addressed. We're just waiting for the government to, or DEFRA to come back to us with what that magic figure is.
Thank you, Chairman.
As Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I welcome this report. I think the report acknowledges that the air pollution, or the NOx, kind of affects heart disease and cancer and that kind of thing. But it also notes that the mortality in 4.9%, which I think is still quite high. And I think, thank you for all your hard work and your team's work, which you acknowledge. I think still a lot more to do to bring that level down. So I think any support we can do as a council, with the partners like Manchester County Council, we'll fully support that.
Anybody else? Sarah?
I think that it gives confidence if members of the public, like our very clever Dr. Turner, can see a trend on our website, and that used to be the case. So in areas where there are real problems, I think we can see what the trends are and then we can do something about it. And I think we should work to be bringing that again. We could do it 10 years ago, we can do it now.
David?
One quick question as well. We've got the note in para 3.2 the AQMA was set up in 2011. Is that going to stay in place then, or will that be then removed at some point?
I was going to mention that as part of my main talk, but I didn't mention it. But I've got really positive news to make on that. So in 2019, we started to look at removing or revoking the air quality management area. Then COVID hit, and then we took the decision that it would be unfair to remove it at that particular point, particularly because people were in lockdown and the NOx levels were going to be particularly low. So we decided that we'll leave it till next year, and then next year we'll start looking into revoking the air quality management area, and as part of that we'll go out for consultation.
Okay, thank you, sounds good.
So I think, yeah, as members have said, this is a report which we welcome. Thank you, Mike, for that and the detailed talk through it. It is an ongoing process which I think we need to keep on top of and monitor, and we look forward to receiving further updates and reports in due course. Thank you very much. Thank you. So all those in favour, please show. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is item 8, Ukrainian resettlement. This is for information, and the report highlights that presently there's 3 schemes to support those who wish to either come to or remain in the UK. Yeah. So the three schemes which are highlighted in the report: the Ukraine Family Scheme, Ukraine Extension Scheme, and Home for Ukraine. And I'll bring in Wayne to talk in a bit more detail on this report. Wayne?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Wayne Forrest, I'm the Housing Needs Manager. Purpose of the report is to provide committee with an update regarding the resettlement of Ukrainian households in the Pendle area. As Chair has said, there's three schemes in operation. There's the Ukraine Family Scheme and the Ukraine Extension Scheme, both of which they do work nationally, but we're not aware of very many large numbers in that area. The main scheme, which many of the public are aware of, is the Homes for Ukraine scheme, and this is whereby a person can sponsor a Ukrainian household and they receive £350 per month for basically housing that person within their household. The government has now extended the Homes for Ukraine scheme with higher payments after the first year of sponsorship to try and help avoid pressures on rehousing when the families are ready for moving on from those properties. Lancashire County Council lead on the overall project, including delivering support to the Ukrainian households. Our council's role is to undertake property checks to make sure the property is safe, to administer the £350 payments each month to the sponsor households, and to deal with rehousing when the Ukrainian household are ready for moving on. In terms of the report and the statistics from the 20th of January, is that there were 41 Ukrainian households who resettled with sponsors in Pendle. Of those, 27 households were currently being sponsored at that point, and 14 households had moved on positively through a number of rehousing routes. I would just add that obviously this report was two months ago in terms of those statistics. At present, the latest figure we have is there's 27 households currently being sponsored in our area. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, again, welcome the report. Thank you for Wayne for his continued hard work. He works extremely hard, and his team works, very hard all year round. And it's good to see that, we, as a Pendle Council, we're supporting the refugees from Ukraine. Ukraine's having quite a tough time with one of the world's most, like a military superpower, abusing its power basically. So it's good to see that you're supporting the refugees locally. We have done that over the years, and we'll continue to support refugees and other people that need housing in Pendle. So welcome and thank you.
Anybody else?
Not the report, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go back now to item 4. If I can find it. Back and forward that many times, I lost it. Right, okay. So item 4 is an update on the Pendle local plan. So this is, the recommendation is that the committee notes the contents of this report, including the timetable for the preparation of the local plan and member workshops planned for late March, early April. Just want to make a few comments on this. Our group's views remain the same as resolved at a previous full council meeting. We do support an annual housing target of the government standard methodology, 140 or close to it. And I want to take this opportunity of thanking the officers and his team for all their hard work in bringing this forward so speedily. I do want to ask that we continue to work towards a draft of the local plan that reflects our priorities of protecting Pendle's green spaces and heritage, while also encouraging gentle growth, I think is the word, within our, and with beautiful, nice designs and new developments which fit the needs and the priorities of our group. So I'll move the recommendations.
Second that.
Councillor Witt?
Could I just ask on the timing, because I recall a couple of months ago Mr Watson left a site visit to say there was coming back to Nelson, and the local plan was ready to press the button, and so we're now into March, middle of March, and I'm surprised that we don't actually have a draft on the agenda tonight. So could I ask, has there been a subsequent delay?
Neil?
Chairman, yes, we wanted to have the workshops. There has been a slight delay in that respect. We've been involved in the Cone neighbourhood plan, so that's taken some time, which we didn't anticipate. There is also the housing and employment review. The employment review is pretty well there, as is the housing, but census data has come out, so that needed sense checking within that, and obviously with the period and the timetable, it made sense to go to the May, and then meetings with hopefully then a June public consultation.
Okay. Thank you.
David?
Just a couple of questions from me. At the bottom of the first page, we talk about considering conservation issues. Are we covering then both heritage and environment?
Yes.
The heritage assets and all the wonderful work we put in on the non-designated, etc., etc. The other one was about design codes. Because I know obviously they're not mandatory at the moment, but they probably will be. And we talked about it before, and was obviously said that they can be quite expensive, they can be very costly. But obviously you note that they're not currently mandatory, but in the bullet a couple down it says we'll provide the policy base for the development of design codes. So you're sort of leaving the door open to see what we can do.
Yeah, there'll be a hook in there that will, if design codes are produced, or a single one or different ones, that they would then have primacy in terms of the development plan. So there'll be a hook in there if they are produced later on.
Right, okay. And the only other one was about, at the end of 1.6, we've got the point about town centres and vitality and vibrancy. So Class E is the new all-encompassing thing for all the retail outlets. Non-Class E, which is about how we residential things or whatever in town.
Sorry, yeah, Class E includes commercial activities, it includes religious institutions, etc. And the main town centre uses in the National Planning Policy Framework don't include some of those. So that change in legislation affects how that would work, and sequential testing, etc. So we have to have a policy to make sense of all that.
Okay, alright. Yep, that's good. And I think as we touched on earlier, let's try and see what we can do with that timetable, but obviously we know that laws may change, rules may change, etc. So yeah, we'll see. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you know on page 2, the third item from the bottom, in relation to the range of housing needs scenarios identified to be considered depending on the priorities for the brother's future. I think generally speaking, over the years, this is an area we've kind of lapped on, where a lot of young people, are born and brought up here, and they go and have education in other areas, and then they find very good jobs, but they want high market housing, and we lack in that area. I think it's crucial that to keep those young people in the borough to live and also work up, to find jobs elsewhere. I don't know this which is fair, but to keep those people in the borough, it's crucial that we have that kind of high-end housing, and I think that needs to be tackled within this local plan this time round.
Just to add to that one as well, I think you're right in terms of getting young people starter homes, etc. Almost like the good old-fashioned terrace house was an excellent starter home, I'm sure, for most of us. That's the sort of thing where you've got your starter home. The idea of a sort of virtuous housing circle of people, as people move into family homes, then they retire, and you've got to get more bungalows as well. And there's a chronic shortage of bungalows in the area, for example. The idea of older people living accommodation, etc. So almost like having different sorts of housing, I think, in different locations to cater for that is good.
Thank you. Okay. All those in favour? Please show. Thank you very much. Next item is item 5. Borough of Pendle compulsory purchase order. This is a report is to accept a revised boundary line for the proposed CPO area. There was some part of which was canopy structure fronting the entrance of the former market hall, which was missed out. So it's basically incorporating that within the boundary. So I'll move that.
I'll second it.
In favour, please show. Yeah. Next item is item 6. It's a consultation to improve planning performance through an increase in planning fees. So consultation which we need to respond to. The responses are at the back of the report. And in terms of the planning fees, they were last increased in 2018. There's been no increase in the fees since then. And I think the consultation recognised that having sufficient resources and skills in planning services is fundamental to making sure that the planning process is effective and speed is of the essence when it comes to planning applications, and we deal with planning applications accordingly. The deadline for the consultation is 25th of April, and some of the contents within the report are interesting, to say the least. In terms of staffing in terms of planning department, that's up to the normal level. Planning applications are being dealt with at a quicker speed. There were some issues which we accept, but I think them issues we've kind of ironed out now. So I'm happy to move the report.
I'll second that.
Yep. All those in favour? Sure. Against? Okay. Thank you very much. Next is tenders. Noted. I'll move that we note the report. Yeah.
Second it.
Thank you. That's fine. Next item is item 10. This is an item referred from Nelson Area Committee, land adjoining 54 Carlton Street, Nelson. And the recommendation from the area committee is to declare the land surplus to requirements and to be sold to the adjoining owner. I'll move the recommendation as set out. Thank you. Any all those in favour? Sarah, do you want to speak?
I do want to speak,
Okay.
because I've met residents in the street and they tell me, we can't be certain of their veracity, this is not my ward, but they tell me the person doing the flighter thing is the man who would seek to benefit from the purchase of this piece of land. And it seems to me like Pendle Council's hand is being forced here, and we are willing victims. It isn't, we're not talking about something that's just the most magnificent little space, but it's pleasing enough, and in a very, very built up area, it's just that little bit of breathing space. So certainly, I think that we shouldn't give in to what really is some level of moral blackmail, potentially, and we should try to keep this little area for these local residents. It's very small, and certainly if we are going to dispose of it, if we do decide to dispose of it, we shouldn't just be disposing it to the person who is continually petitioning for it to be disposed to him. We should put it for open market, not only to get best value for the council, but also to make sure that it is fair to anybody and it's not a closed shop when we dispose of our assets. So that's my view. So I'm against this recommendation.
So, David?
I'll just add a bit to that as well. I mean, it's one of those things. Fly tipping, litter, etc. is more something that we have a team of people who go around. They have to pick it all up. They also do enforcement work on it, etc. And I think we could reduce the burden if we start to say, well, we don't want to own these assets. I mean, Pendle seems to have a myriad of properties under its belt, patches of land here, there, and everywhere. So I think the idea of then saying, well, you know, let's make our lives easier. I don't know how we even got to own this land. I mean, presumably it was a corner house once and it knocked down or fell down or something. But somehow Pendle Borough Council seems to own it, which is an amazing thing. So I think we're almost heading towards a policy of saying let's make our lives easier, let's use the resources we've got for the right kind of jobs, and let's not have to get bogged down in these sorts of things. But I'd agree, if we are going to market it, we should put it on the open market.
Are you moving that as an amendment?
Yeah?
Yeah, I've moved the recommendation. Yeah, I've moved it and it's been seconded.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Who seconded it? I'm sorry.
I'll second.
And there were 2 seconders. Councillor Heath.
Thirded.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I think my view, I hear the arguments which Sarah and David raised, but I think my view is the person, Sarah's probably going to disagree with me, but I think the person most likely to look after that site is, or of any benefit really, that site would be to the adjoining neighbour, the property right next to it, because what's tend to happen from experience is I know a couple of plots in Nelson, similar gable end pieces of land, which Pendle Council put on the open market. Anybody could have bidded for it. So some potential investors sometimes get a bit excited, think they're going to make lots of money from buying a small piece of land like this for a couple of thousand. And what happens is, it's happened, I gave an example in our pre-meeting down Carr Road, which is a little piece of land owned by Lancashire County Council. And my concern at that time was, look, unless the neighbour buys it, no one else is going to look after that piece of land, and that's exactly what's happened. It's gone, it's been sold to some random person who doesn't live in the area, has just left it, it's got lots of grass growing on it now, and people keep dumping furniture, etc. on it. And the neighbour now regrets it, said, if I had it, I could have fenced it off, I could have used it as a garden. And that's my concern. I think if somebody, we just put it on the open market, we're going to get some random person say, I've got a couple of grand, because that's not worth a lot of money, a few grand here or there, I'll just buy and sit on it. And that's the concern. And then we'll be in the same position where people are fly tipping on this site. So I think my view would be, at least if it goes to the neighbour, it's more likely to be used in a sensible manner. So I'll stick to the recommendation.
Can I ask a question then? Do we know what the plans are for this gentleman? What does he plan to do with it? And if we're talking about a long leasehold, presumably we can start to steer what it is. So we don't necessarily want somebody to put up, 8 feet tall fencing left, right and centre just to put a car in there. That's not really going to help the community in any way, is it? They currently have a place, we went there, it's got a tree, it's got a bench, obviously it's got various fridges, but they'll be gone. So, what's the plan for it?
Perhaps Howard
can we dictate?
Yeah, perhaps Howard can assist, because usually in these sorts of, there's covenants in the transfer deed that they can use it for like a private garden. Is that what we normally do?
Okay.
Okay. So, there's an amendment. Yeah, so we'll go with the amendment first. All those in favour?
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I don't think so, because I just want...
All right.
No, we're not agreeing. The Coburn Price is not agreeing here.
No.
I don't.
I've got no supporters, so I'll withdraw the amendment.
All right, so you're just going to vote against it, right? Okay, fine. Right, so all those in favour of the recommendation? Sure. Okay, against? Okay, fine. Next item is item 12. Yeah. Part 2 exempt item. This is, we need to take a vote on exclusion of public and press, unfortunately. Members of the public have survived on there.
Chairman, I would like to argue against excluding the press and public. The next item of business is to discuss the groundwater issues on Wentcliffe Drive at Earby. This has been discussed in open committee at the area committee. It's something that is of significant importance for the residents that are affected by the groundwater issues, and I think it's in the public interest that we discuss this in public, and I can't see that there's any necessity to take it in private.
Yeah, Council Whip, I accept what you're saying. Of course, it's of real importance to the residents which are directly affected by this issue, which has been long-standing and ongoing for quite some time.
Chair, there was a meeting that took place, I think Yes.
I don't mind this debate.
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, has that not been circulated?
No.
Oh, I think it has actually, because I think an email was sent to councillors of a meeting that happened. Have you seen that, Councillor?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah.
Indeed, I have. That was circulated to the councillors who were present.
Yes.
I don't think it's been circulated to members of this committee.
So I just want to clarify that there is a report that contains legal advice. My concern is that that report should not be discussed in public. But if the meeting that's taking place and things coming out of that meeting, I'm quite happy for those to be discussed in open session. But in terms of the narrow issue I raise in the report, my advice is not to waive your legal privilege on it.
My view on it is because there is advice by Howard within that report, which I think we do need to discuss, and we need to have a debate around that advice. And I think that is privileged legal advice. I don't think that should be discussed in a public forum.
Chairman, I'm quite happy not to discuss that. I'd like to discuss the general issue.
We discuss the general issue. That's fine. Yeah. So we can't. But we can't. I don't believe. But my concern is, I think, for us to have a complete, a proper debate, that needs to be. Yeah. So I don't see how we can have a proper debate without not discussing the advice, because that's the advice of our professionals.
Right, well,
I think that is privileged.
I'll vote against that exclusion of
Yeah, but I've just had advice, so I want to follow that advice. Yeah. So we'll go to the vote on that exclusion of public and press. All those in favour of excluding public and press, please show. All those against? Okay. So very sorry.
I've only just sat down.
I know.